Okay. So good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all again. And if you'd like, you can show your video. We don't charge extra. It's always nice to see feedback from people, knowing that they're here and I could see facial expressions. What I do want to mention before we start is I'd like to thank our anonymous sponsor for tonight's class. Tonight's class is sponsored by Anonymous. And may God bless you and your family, extended family, with all wonderful blessings. And the greatest blessing of all, that we should soon experience the Moshiach, which is why we're doing all these mitzvahs. May that happen very speedily. Amen. So thank you so much for enabling this to happen. Okay, so as usual, we're going to start off with a joke. Or as I like to say, a joke that's not funny. So today's goes like this. A guy comes to his rabbi, says, Rabbi. Rabbi says, what? He says, listen, Rabbi, I'm full of remorse. I can't even bring myself to tell you what I did. Rabbi says, tell me, what's the big sin? What did you do already? He's having trouble getting it out. The rabbi calms him down, talks to him, finally says, Rabbi, you wouldn't believe it. I ate bread without washing my hands. And the rabbi says, okay, you ate bread without washing your hands. First, I mean, it's not such a great thing, but it's not so terrible. But why didn't you wash your hands? I mean, you always wash your hands. He says, because I was eating in a non-kosher restaurant. So the rabbi says, oh, it's getting a little worse. Why were you eating in a non-kosher restaurant? He says, well, all the kosher restaurants were closed. He says, well, wait, kosher, why were all the kosher restaurants closed? He says, Rabbi, because it was Yom Kippur. Okay, so that's the joke for today. And so what's the connection to my class? The connection to my class is going to be sometimes things are seen at a surface level. He didn't wash his hands, but there's a lot more going on. And so this is going to dovetail off of last week's class. Last week's class, we spoke about the Moshiach, and we spoke about the beautiful prophecies of peace and harmony and health and all the wonderful blessings that come along with that. And objectively, we can see how all those prophecies are being fulfilled. However, that is really only part of the story. That is really scratching the surface of what the Messiah is about. Redemption is not just about world peace, universal prosperity, curing disease. There are many, many other prophecies that describe a couple other things. For example, the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, the return of the Jewish people to the homeland, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty and unity, which means, I don't know if you know, Israel's maybe heading for a fifth election, but even before that, our tiny country, Israel, of only 12 tribes, small nation of 2 million people enters Israel. They had two kingdoms. Not one kingdom wasn't enough. They had two kingdoms. So this is something that's been going on for a long time. Okay, it's not just modern Israel. So the prophets say when Mashiach will come, we'll have one kingdom. We also have a prophecy that there will be a full implementation of the commandments, and that all humankind will recognize God and serve Him. So I do want to show you some of these items in the books of the prophets, because I want you to believe me. If you have the book, I believe it's on page 124. But okay, yes, it's 124. Let's take a look at some of these prophecies. Just give me a moment here. Not 124. I'm going way too far. It's going to be on page prophecies. Sorry. They're going to be on page 91. So the prophecies are on page 91. We're not going to look at all of these prophecies, but I do want to show you a couple of prophecies. I'm going to throw it up here on the screen for you. And this is to show you that not only do the prophecies talk about a peaceful world, but it talks about something much greater than that. Do you see the text on the screen? Yes. Okay, good. It is interesting because a lot of people think that, what are we trying to do and what are we trying to accomplish with the Moshiach, and it's just world peace. And that's nice, but if you look in actual prophets, it's a lot more than just world peace. So let's take a look over here. I want to point a couple of the prophecies. Let's first start with a little bit of Ezekiel. Ezekiel over here says, Ezekiel 37, he says, my servant David shall be king over them, and one shepherd will be for them all. That's referring to unity. So no 5 elections. It's going to be one king. King David is going to be the ruler. Well, not King David himself, but from the family of King David will be ruler over all the Jewish people. So that's unity amongst the Jewish people, which is a pretty cool thing. The other thing we have over here is from Isaiah 27. And here we have about the ingathering of the exile. It shall come to pass over here, over there. It shall come to pass on that day that a great shofar shall be sounded, and they will come, those lost in the land of the Assyria and those exiled in the land of Egypt. They will bow to God in the holy mountain in Jerusalem. So again, we're going to have a big blowing of the shofar, and those who are lost in exile, 10 lost tribes, or anybody exiled anywhere will come back. So again, we have a promise of unity amongst the Jewish people in the land of Israel, a promise that we will all come back, which, by the way, the fact that those two go together is amazing, right? It's one thing if only the Jews that are there, but imagine we bring all the Jews. So we now have, if 2 Jews are 3 opinions, imagine you have 18 million Jews, how many opinions you have, but nevertheless, we'll have one king. Then we have over here, again, Isaiah, Ibid means the previous thing. He says, it shall come to pass in the last days that the mount of the house of God will be established atop the mountains. That's referring to the holy temple, and be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. So that means that we will have the mountain of God, the mountain of the Temple Mount. It will be established, and all the nations will come to see it. And he continues over here. Many nations will go and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of God, to the house of God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For from Zion shall go forth Torah, and from the word of God, and the word of God from Jerusalem. Which, by the way, that text, that last verse is one that you should all be familiar with in Hebrew. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. So this is the source. From Zion shall go forth Torah, and the word of God from Jerusalem, and that's talking about the future redemption when everybody will be learning from the Holy Temple. So again, what we have here so far is the gathering of the exiles, a single king for all of us, building the temple. All the nations will live upon our light. And now let's get to Jeremiah. Well, I'll skip a little bit over here to Jeremiah. Jeremiah 31. And this refers to the completion of Torah mitzvahs. For this is the covenant that will form with the house of Israel after those days, says God. I will place my Torah in their innards, and I will inscribe it upon their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a person teach their fellow, for all will know me from their smallest to their greatest. So that means will come a time when we will all know what to do. The Torah will be ingrained in us, and we'll follow all of the teachings. So this is a completion of the Torah and the mitzvot. And finally, we have one of the most beautiful prophecies from Zephaniah. He says, therefore, await me, says God, for the day that I will arise to meet with you. For then I will convert the nations to a pure language, that all of them will call on the name of God to serve him of one accord. And it doesn't mean everybody will be Jewish, but everybody will serve God. And so here we have a couple prophecies that show us that it's not just about the wolf will lie with the lamb and there will be peace and there'll be no more sickness, but there's a lot more to it. You know, the Torah mitzvot will be complete. We'll be gathered to our land. We'll build a temple. And it kind of begs the question, which is, you know, we can understand, you know, we need to work towards a day of world peace and, you know, that everybody gets along. But why is it so important? The temple, why is it so important? The gathering of the exiles, can we not, you know, live in a peaceful world and do our Torah mitzvah from the different places? As I mentioned in the previous course, right, it's the long joke, but I'll make it short. The story was, you know, there was a peasant that he was, one time a rabbi came to his inn and was telling him all about Moshiach and how we'll all go to Israel. And the peasant didn't have any interest. So the rabbi told him, you know, you want to pray for Moshiach because, you know, the anti-Semites live here. Shouldn't you be excited? When Moshiach comes, you'll escape all the anti-Semites here in Poland. And so the guy goes back to his wife and he comes back to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, my wife and I came up with a great idea. Instead of us going to Israel, leaving all our stuff behind, Why don't the anti-Semites go to Israel and we'll live peacefully over here? Was his response. And but in a sense, it's a question like, what is the necessity to go back to the way it was? What is the necessity therein? And more importantly, why is that an important factor in the perfect world? Maybe it's something that will also happen, but it seems from the prophets, when they talk about it again and again, that a perfect world means not only a world where there's no war and there's peace between the nations and there's no fighting and people get along, but the perfect world looks like when we live in Israel, when we all live in Israel, when we have a single kingdom, when we have the temple. Why is that considered a perfect world? Now, I'll just say a caveat. In the previous course that I gave, we gave an answer that, simply put, the mitzvahs can only really be done in Israel. And so it's important, and with the Holy Temple. And that's why it's important. We need to have all of these things. And today we're going to take it a step deeper. And as we've mentioned in our JLI course, everything has a body and a soul, right? So what's a body and a soul? A body is the actual physical outside, and the soul is the inside. So for example, you have a mitzvah. A mitzvah also has a body and a soul. There's an action you do, and there's the feeling behind it. Everything has a form and energy. And or let's give another example. You have food. You can even say food, the food, the taste, the texture, that's the body, and the nutrients is the soul. But if you take it even deeper, the soul of the food is actually the word of God that's within the bread, that's within the food that's giving you your sustenance. So everything has a body and soul, but you can always go deeper and deeper. So when we talk about the redemption and this perfect world that's going to exist, the body of that perfect world is the world peace. The body of that perfect world is no more sickness. The body of that perfect world is everybody getting along. But the soul of it is something else. And that's what we're going to delve into today, is the soul. What is the soul of the redemption? What is the inner dynamics of the redemption? What truly is the idea behind the redemption? Why do we need it? Why is it so important? And actually, over this course, we're going to discuss from the inner perspective, how did we get to where we are today? How do we get to where we're going? And why is this whole journey necessary? So again, if you think of it, there's a destination. That much we know. There's the Messiah. There's definitely a destination. There's a sign that says the Messiah. This is the end of days, as we were reading the prophecies. The question is, there's a journey getting there. And so we have one question, which is, how do we get along that journey to get to the end? But before we even discuss how do I get to my destination, I need to discuss, why is this journey even necessary? And that's what we're going to discuss today. What is it that we're working towards from a very inner perspective? So again, I'm not going to answer today. We're working for the Moshiach so we can have world peace. We're working for the Moshiach so people can get along. It's a lot deeper than that. God is, I would believe, a lot more deep than that, than just trying to achieve world peace. And it's clear from the prophets that is the case, because along with all the prophecies about the body, so to speak, the beautiful world that's going on and everything being nice and candies growing on trees, there's also a spiritual component to it, which is obviously the soul of the redemption. And we're going to discuss today why, the why, as Simon Sinek, if anybody ever listened to him, Simon Sinek, right? Start with the why. We're going to start with the why. Why is it that we're doing all that we're doing? Why is this whole journey necessary? What is it that God wants of us, and where is he trying to get us to? Any questions or thoughts? Nope. It's all simple. Anybody confused yet? I'll get you confused soon if you're not. Okay. Okay. So again, to recap, we have, last week we discussed, we can credibly look at some prophecies about the physicality of the Messianic times and say, wow, we're really getting there. But then when we look at these spiritual prophecies and we want to know, what is that about? Why is that important? And what is it that we're trying to accomplish? And so that's what we're going to discuss today. As I mentioned, a caveat in a previous course, I discussed why in Judaism we need the Moshiach. It's so important because we need to get all the mitzvahs done, but we're going to add a component to that. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, and it is a little bit of a repetition from the previous course, but so I'm going to go through it a little quicker. And this is really a discussion of, we see that Judaism has an obsession with the redemption. And that's important to what we're discussing today, because if the redemption was only about world peace, Judaism would not be obsessed with it. Like I gave the example last time. If it was all just about living a better life. So for example, right, we lived in COVID for a long time, but maybe people in synagogues made prayers to get rid of COVID or whatever it is, but nobody would say we should mention our prayer to get rid of COVID every moment of our prayers, or at least half of our prayers should be discussing getting rid of COVID, right? And the thing is, though, when we look in Judaism, we'll see there's a hyper obsession with the Messiah, which tells me that it's not just something that is something we look forward to, something that gives us hope for the future, but it is an integral part of Judaism, and without which Judaism is missing an integral part. So one example is the prayers that we say every day. Every single day, we're supposed to say the Amidah. The Amidah is the silent devotional prayer. We pray every single day. It's the pinnacle of prayer. And there's 18 blessings in that prayer. At this pinnacle point of prayer, it's actually the only part of the prayer service where we're standing in front of God. And there are 18, actually today, 19 blessings. And so we say this 3 times a day. So 19 blessings, the pinnacle of prayer when we ask for our needs, standing in front of God. Of those 19 blessings, how many of them are about the Moshiach? Any answers? You can count also in the book if you have the student book. 7. So 7 out of 18. So 7 out of 18. So 7 out of 18 times 3. So what's 7 times 3? Anybody? You have to unmute. I'm testing if you're on mute. I know it's an easy math. 21, right? Just making sure you're not sleeping. Okay. So we have 21 times a day we ask for the Moshiach in our devotional prayers when we're standing in front of God asking for our needs. I'll just throw out a couple over here on the screen. Let's take a look. Let's see over here. A 7th blessing. Oh, behold our affliction and wage our battle. Redeem us speedily for the sake of your name. For you, God, are the mighty Redeemer. Blessed are you, Lord God, Redeemer of Israel. Or you have sound the great shofar for our freedom. Raise the banner to gather exiles and bring us together from the 4 corners of the earth and into our land. Blessed are you, Lord, who gathered the dispersed of his people, Israel. So again and again, we have 7 times discussing about the Mashiach. All right, so that's prayers. And really, when you look throughout the other prayers, also we'll discuss Mashiach too. Where else in Judaism do we bring out a request for Mashiach? A normative Judaism. Any other takers? Anybody can think of something on off the top of their mind? Where else in Judaism do we request a Mashiach or do things that are connected to Mashiach? Any thoughts? You got to unmute though. Anybody ever been to a wedding? No, nobody's been to a wedding. What do you do by the wedding?
Are you talking about the rebuilding?
At the wedding, you break the glass, right? Right. At every wedding, at the last thing in the wedding, they break the glass, right? They put the cup under the groom's foot. The rabbi says, "This is a lesson. This is the last time you're going to put your foot down," and he breaks the cup. All right, sorry about that joke. And he breaks the cup. No, you didn't catch it. Okay, even better. He says, and he breaks the cup, and that's to commemorate the destruction of the temple. At every joyous occasion, we break a glass. Similarly, some of the prayers under the chuppah, we ask for the redemption, right? We say we should hear once again, in the cities of Jerusalem and in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, the voice of the bridegroom. We also have when someone passes away. Many of the customs are connected to our affirmation of the belief in the resurrection. Many of the customs that we discussed in the previous course. Also, we tell the person, may God console you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Similarly, we have in the Jewish calendar 3 weeks of the year where we focus on the destruction of the temple. Every time we eat bread, we have both before we do the grace after meals and during the grace after meals sections where we ask for the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the temple. And so again, this is a common theme throughout Judaism, again and again and again, asking for the redemption. Similarly, anybody knows Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith? Maimonides wrote 13 Principles of Faith, and these are called Principles of Faith, as I discussed there. And not only the principles, they're foundational ideas. Some of them we can understand. There is a God is perfect. God is absolutely one. God is not physical. God is timeless, eternal. It's imperative to worship God. God communicates to humanity through prophecy. Moses' prophecies are true. The Torah is of divine origin. God is not physical. God knows and concerns himself with everything. God rewards those who do good. And then, number 12 and 13, the belief in anticipation of the coming of the Moshiach, the belief in the future resurrection of the dead. So this is of the 13 principles of faith. There's nothing in there you have to believe in kosher. Nothing in there you belief in the Shabbat. Okay, belief in God and Torah in general, but a principle faith, suddenly one thing gets in there, one detail, right? None of these other ones are really details. All these are generalities. The only detail that gets in there is the belief in anticipation of the coming of the Mashiach and the belief in the future resurrection of the dead. And it's only a list of 13, not too many things. And so once again, this points to us is that without the belief in the Mashiach, Judaism is lacking. Something is very foundation. And this really connects with what I said earlier, is that the Mashiach is not just to usher in an era of world peace. And that's not the only thing that we're working towards, because then it wouldn't make the list. It wouldn't be that important. That wouldn't be something we'd pray for 21 times a day. And it may not be obvious to the casual observer, but once you delve into the prophecies and realize that the Mashiach has a highly spiritual component to it, then we can start to appreciate and understand the obsession that Judaism has with the Mashiach. However, we still have to understand why. What is so important about that era? In other words, many people look at the Mashiach, like, why were Jews obsessed with the Mashiach? It was the way of their survival. And to an extent, it probably did help. But the Mashiach is not just a response to the exile, but the Mashiach is obviously a foundation of Judaism, and it was actually the goal of what God wanted in this world. And I'm going to show you just that if we look at Deuteronomy. If we look at Deuteronomy, it says text number 3. Oddly enough, this is before the Jews even got into the land of Israel. So this is before they sinned, before they were exiled, so that they had to come back. So what does it say? God will return your exiles, and he will have mercy upon you. He will return and gather you from all the nations amongst whom God has scattered you. If your outcast will be at the end of the heavens, from there God will gather you, from there he will take you. God will bring you into the land your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it. He will do you good and multiply you more than your ancestors, and you will return and listen to the voice of God and fulfill all his commandments. So here we have 3,300 years ago, even before we were exiled, Moses was prophesying that there would be an exile and we would be redeemed. So before exile had even taken place, there was already prophecies that we would be redeemed. Not only that, you look in the books of all the prophets. The prophets also were before the Second Temple, at least. So they were not a byproduct of exile. In fact, many of them were prophesying during the times of the temple. But nevertheless, someone says, yes, we'll get to that in a moment. But nevertheless, they understood that the Mashiach is the ultimate goal of the world. In other words, they were living in a time when Jews were sinning. So they could have just said, act well, everything will be good. But they had to prophesize about the Mashiach times. So obviously, that is the ultimate place where we're going to get to. Now, someone mentioned in the chat, is not Mashiach actually baked into creation itself? And the answer is yes. So who knows what the first verse in the Torah is? Who can tell me the first verse? In English. You don't tell me in Hebrew. You have to unmute though.
You're talking about in the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning, yeah. Not baseball in the big inning, but in the beginning, yeah.
God created heaven and the earth.
God created the heaven and the earth. Good, very good. All right, everybody knows the first verse. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. What is the next verse? Anybody knows off the top of their head? That's something we all forget.
Okay.
And the earth was void and without form.
Very good. Very good. All right, you got it. So let's throw it up here on the screen. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was chaotic and desolate, many ways of translating it. And darkness was on the face of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God hovered upon the waters. You know, whenever I read that last line, the Spirit of God hovered upon the waters, I think of like the Everglades, and God's in like this hovercraft, one of those airboats that go over the Everglades. But when you read, it's like, what does it even mean? Like the earth is chaotic and desolate, and God's in an airboat or something? I mean, what's going on over here? You know, Spirit of God is floating. So let's take a look at Rabbeinu Bachaya. He was a scholar in the 1200s. He says something very interesting. The Spirit of God, he quotes the Medrash, the Spirit of God, this is the soul of Moshiach. So again, second verse in the Torah, telling us what went on the first day of creation. The world is desolate. God's Spirit is hovering over the world. What is that Spirit? It's the Spirit of the soul. This is the soul of Moshiach. And let's continue. The meaning of this Midrash is, in this passage, God is foretelling the end at the beginning. The Torah's intention is to indicate the end of time at the very beginning of time, to teach us that the ultimate purpose of God's creation of the world is the days of Mashiach. Thus, the original thought is actualized in the conclusion of the work. Let me just explain what that means for a moment. When you build a building, hopefully you have an idea, you have an end product in mind before you start building, right? So you first come to an architect, you tell them, I have a vision of a medical office. Okay, let's say you have a vision of a medical office, and you tell them all the things you want in the medical office. Why do I keep picking on the doctors? Okay, I have a vision of this medical office, and you have this idea, and it should have X amount of surgery rooms. Now, as the visionary, you don't really have to be the architect. Now then the architects come in, and they draw plans, and they draw detailed plans, and where piping goes, and so it gets very messy after the vision. After the vision, it gets very messy, and then the plumbers come in, and they put plumbing in, and then the electricians come in, and as an outside observer, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to be built there per se, as you watch it being built. But the person who started the whole project, and by the way, it's possible even the electrician doesn't have an idea what the vision is. He's just putting in the wires. But the person who had the vision of the medical building, he sees it from the beginning, how it's going to look at the end. So similarly, God created this world. Now, there's a lot of components till it gets to its perfection. But already in the beginning, he knew what he wanted. He knew what the ultimate vision is, how it's going to look at the end, and that is the times of the Mashiach. And so here we see what I'm trying to build up here is that, the Mashiach is much more than just a physical, just a perfect world per se, as people call it. It is a spiritual utopia, I would put it. And not only is it a spiritual utopia, it is, as we discussed in previous course, but it is actually the purpose for which God created the world, and it's the reason why he started off to begin with, and which will lead us to the next question, because every answer leads to a question, which is, so what is that purpose that he wants? What is this Mashiach that he wants? What is it that he's seeking? But again, what we've got to is that the Mashiach is a lot more than we thought. So in order to recap, in order to help everybody over here, we're going to go over these slides. Hopefully this will help ground us into what we discussed till now, summarize before we go on to the next part. So to recap, here are some of the prophecies that we didn't discuss last week: building the temple, ingathering of the exile, completion of the mitzvot, all the nations coming to hear from the temple. So why does the messianic goal of a better world require the universal recognition of God and the full implementation of Torah and mitzvot? Why are the two intertwined? Why do they, so to speak, come together? Why isn't it enough for to work for world peace and for the elimination of violence, poverty, and disease? Why is that not enough? Why do we need to deal with the spiritual side of it? Mashiach is pervasive in Judaism, and since we now know there is a spiritual, very highly spiritual side to the Mashiach, it makes sense, that it's a very highly featured item of Judaism in our daily prayers at mealtimes. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that when we wash our hands, the reason we wash our hands is because when the Mashiach comes, when the temple is back, many times you need to wash your hands before you eat. So even though now we don't really need to wash our hands, we do it to prepare so when Mashiach comes, we're not stuck, not knowing what to do. The Jewish calendar, I forgot to mention that. Yes, a lot of Jewish observances are connected to the Mashiach. We have the shank bone that commemorates the Passover lamb. We have the egg that commemorates another offering. We have the cup of Elijah. You know, we have it at a bris. We have Elijah, and many parts in Judaism. We have at a Jewish wedding, breaking the cup, death and mourning. We have many customs. So, based on what we've said, that there's a highly spiritual component to the Moshiach, it makes sense that the Moshiach features very, very highly in Jewish practice and prayers, to the point where we mention him 21 times a day in our prayers. No, I don't want to watch that video. That video just goes over the 13 principles of faith, but that will distract us from our focus over here. Okay. All right, so those are the last two principles of faith: belief in anticipation of Mashiach, belief in the resurrection. So Mashiach, as we've concluded now, is not just a solution to our exile, meaning the bad physical parts of it. Moshe prophesied about the exile and redemption at the same time. And then we take it a step further. The ultimate purpose of God's creation of the world is the days of Mashiach, as we saw, when the world was desolate, the spirit of the Mashiach was just sitting there. So Mashiach is a central pillar of Jewish faith. It's central to Jewish prayer and practice. It predates exile, and it even predates creation. Okay, so let's move on. Any questions or comments before I move on?
I do, Rabbi. I sent you one in the chat. I'm a bit confused. So when we talk about redemption, redemption, are you talking about why do we need the Mashiach? Is that the question?
All right, so we'll get to the okay, I keep intertwining Mashiach and redemption. Mashiach is the man who's going to usher in the era of redemption. Why we need a man and what's the importance of it, I believe, is more of the topic of the 6th class. But for now, suffice to say, there's an era of the Mashiach. Okay, it's an era, it's a time. The Mashiach is the person who ushers it in. Does that answer your question for now? So we're not going to get into why do we need a man to usher in an era. That's not going to be tonight's discussion.
Okay, so the redemption is an era that will usher in the Mashiach.
No, the Mashiach will usher in the era of the redemption.
Okay.
So look at it like Joshua brought the Jews into the land of Israel, right?
Yeah.
Solomon is the one that ushered the Jews into the era of the temple. The Mashiach is the one that will usher us into the redemption. Okay?
Okay.
So sometimes it's called Mashiach, but many times it's called Yemosa Mashiach, the days of Mashiach. So we're going to get into the personality of Mashiach in a later class in this course.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, but so I will sometimes say redemption. I'll sometimes say Mashiach. It's one and the same for the sake of the discussion till now. Okay. Good question. Any other questions? No, someone's calling me. Maybe that's a question, but I'm not going to pick it up. Okay. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next step. So like I said, we have now more questions than answers. We know that the Mashiach, or the times of the Mashiach, or the redemption, getting confused over there? Okay. One of the three, whatever you want to call it, one of the three is the purpose for which God created the world. But now we have to ask why, what is it? What is it that God is looking for? So let's take a look. Let's think of it this way. If God had a desire, if God had something that he wanted, right? Why didn't he make it in the beginning? So earlier I brought an example. If I want to build a medical office, it takes time. I need to bring in the electrician and the plumber, the architect. But God is not human, right? God is not human.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes.
Your last statement.
Yes, go for it.
God in the beginning created everything perfect. So he had what he wanted. Of course, he also created an avenue for failure to achieve that immediately. So my question is, if everything was perfect, but he allowed the imperfect to, which he also created, because free choice makes for the commission of imperfection. We have the propensity for perfection within us because we have a perfect soul. My question is, why go through all of this when he had what he originally intended anyway?
All right, so the first answer is that God never actually made the world perfect. I actually discussed it in the class, Secrets of the Bible. What would have happened if Adam didn't sin? If you actually look in the Torah, it says when God put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, before they sinned, they were their la'avda u'lashamra, to work it and to guard it. So they had a job even before they sinned. And so what we discussed then, and I can't go over it now, is they had a job. There was something they were going to do. The world was not perfect, but they complicated their job, okay? They definitely made their job a lot more complicated by sinning, but the world was not created perfect, okay?
So the word good, after every element of creation, he looked upon what he made and he saw that it was good, except on the sixth day.
On the second
he didn't use the word good when he created Adam.
On the second day, he doesn't say it. Yeah. The world was not perfect. It says elsewhere in the Midrash, God left one side open, whatever that means mystically. I'll bring a text later that shows the world wasn't created perfect. Suffice it to say, the world wasn't created complete. How about that? The world was not created complete. If you want to use a different word, the world was not created complete. We definitely made our mission more complicated. But the question would be, if God is infinite, why didn't he create the world complete? Okay. If I'm building a house, if I'm building a medical office, it will take me a lot of time to build it. Hence my example earlier. But God, if you want something, poof, you can get it done, right? I've been asking for the lotto for a while already, you know. All right. I'm just gonna mute you over there for 1 second. Okay, all right. So to answer this question, we're going to need to back up. Why didn't he create the world perfect? Let's back up. Why did he create the world to begin with? So I'm sure if you've hung around Chabad for any length of time, you've probably heard this answer before. And today, hopefully, you'll understand it in a better light. So why did God create the world at all? So let's take a look. As is known, the sages have said that the purpose of creation of this world is that God desired that he should have a home in the lowly world. It is also known that the days of Moshiach, and especially the time of resurrection of the dead, are the fulfillment and culmination of the creation of this world and the purpose for which it was originally created. Good evening, MB. I don't know who you are, but it says MB. Probably some.
It's me.
Huh?
It's Michelle. It's Michelle.
Oh, Michelle. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Now I got it. Okay.
Sorry, I got disconnected.
Okay, no worries. Okay. And when I was in camp, they used to have a program called MBP. It stood for Mishnayos Balpet, means learning Mishnayos by heart. So I was trying to figure out. Okay, anyways. So it says over here, why did God create this world? That there should be a home for God in this low world. So that's the answer. Why did God create this world? I think I've discussed this twice this year. And again, we'll come at a different angle and you come with a new understanding. That he wanted a home in the low world. So we're going to break this down. And so the Moshiach is the fulfillment of that desire. So now we have an understanding. Why did God create this world? To have a home in this low world. And I'm going to focus on that word lowly world. Okay, God wants a home in this lowly world. When is that going to happen? The Moshiach. So now we have a little bit of understanding. God created this world so you could have a home in this world. When's the completion of that? When the Moshiach comes. But again, we have an answer with more questions. What does that mean? What does it mean to have a home in the lowly world? Why was it not complete in the beginning of creation? And why is it going to be complete when the Moshiach comes? So let's read one more text from the Tanya. It says like this. This is what the human being is all about. This is the purpose of the human being's creation and of the creation of all the worlds, both the lofty and the lowly, that God should have this home in the lowly world. So here he's adding an element we didn't say a moment ago. Before we said, why did God create this world so he could have a home in this world? Now he adds another thing, something strange. He says, not only the creation of this world is so he could have a home in this lowly world, but the creation of all the worlds. Now, hopefully you're even more confused. wait, where are these other worlds? Did Elon Musk get there already? What's going on? Where is this place? And what are these other worlds? And then there's other worlds created, and where are they? So before I move on, has anybody here heard about other worlds in Judaism?
Yeah, aren't there 4 different worlds?
Very good. There are four spiritual worlds. So yes, we're gonna have to delve into that a little bit. So I will explain the other worlds in a moment, but let's again recap what we know right now. We know God created not just this world, but it sounds like everything, if there are other worlds. God created everything for this world, this lowly world. So we need to understand, why would everything be for here? What does it even mean that he wants it? And why is it completed when the Moshiach comes? In order to understand that, we first have to explain what are worlds. Why are there lots and lots of worlds? What's the story with that? So if anybody's ever heard, there's something called Seder Hishtalshalut. Anybody ever heard of Seder Hishtalshalut? It's a Hebrew word. Hishtalshalut means a chain. So when you have a chain, there are links connected like this. The top is like kind of, the bottom of this chain is the top of this chain. And so it says God, when he emanated his light to create us, it came to us in a chain. And I'll give you another word that I really like. It's called devolution. Okay. You know what evolution is, right? Evolution means things are getting better. Okay. They evolve to a better state of being. Devolution means, it's not the same as erosion. Devolution means as it progresses, things get worse and worse and worse. So if you were to imagine, I guess, the opposite of evolution, obviously I don't believe that we came from monkeys, but just imagine our kids would turn into more monkeys as each generation going on until we'd all be monkeys. That would be devolution. But again, I don't really know much about evolution, so I don't know if that's true. But devolution means each step is lesser and lower from the preceding step. And so when God created this world, how did we get to the world that we're in? It was through a series of devolution. So there was a world, let's say it was more spiritual, and then less spiritual, and less spiritual, and less spiritual, until we get to our world, which I'm sure you all know is not very spiritual. Okay. But what makes a world? What makes something a world? Is there another world out there that Elon Musk can land and build in a hotel on? Is there or can he dig tunnels to get there? How is he going to get there? Can SpaceX find it or something? And so the answer is, although we can call them the 4 worlds, because that's what they're called, we can also call them the 4 grades of awareness. I'm going to say that again. We could call them 4 worlds, but we can also call them the 4 grades of awareness. Okay, so let me just throw up on the screen over here the 4 worlds, and I'll explain them in a moment. But higher and lower cannot mean closer to God or farther to God, right? Is this earth farther from God than another world? Is this earth farther from God than, let's say, even in this world? Can earth be farther from God than Mars? No, right? Earth can be farther from the sun than Venus is, right? That's possible. They're physical distance, but nobody can be farther from God because God is everywhere. You cannot get farther away from God. So we cannot say there's a higher world and a lower world. The higher world is closer to God and we're farther from God because God is everywhere. But what we can say, and as I said a moment ago, is how aware are we of God? That is what differentiates these different worlds. What is our awareness of God? To give an example, E = mc squared, right? Something that always existed in this world, but not everybody was aware of. Einstein brought an awareness to it. But even now that he's brought an awareness to it in the world, in a room of scientists, there's a larger awareness of that concept than there is in a room of 6-year-olds, right? And so that is what a world is really about. A world is really about olam. World also has the same root words as he'elem, which means concealment. So what is a world? A world is a place where there's a concealment of God. It doesn't mean God's not there. What it means is people are not aware. Just as E = mc squared is equally true everywhere, but not everybody is aware of it, okay? Similarly over here, the difference between these four worlds is going to be our level of awareness of God, okay? And I'll break down those worlds in a moment, but not yet. I'm first trying to present to you what is a world, right? We're used to living in a single world. I don't know why they made it in a big circle, because, all right, so we have concealment. So let me just give you the spiritual example for this concept. We had earlier, we had the 13 principles of faith. What were those principles of faith? One of them was there's a God who is perfect in every way. God is one. God is not physical. God is timeless. All these are true principles, and they're true everywhere. But how much awareness of that is experienced in our world? In our world, it's actually not apparent at all. Somebody can choose to believe in it, and a person can follow it, but we don't have a full awareness of that idea that God is one, that God is present in this world. We don't feel that idea. In fact, in this world, it is possible to deny God's existence. That's why you have Hollywood. Okay, people that not only deny God's existence, they deny other people's existence, right? You know, you can have people who live very self-absorbed, because we're in a world where God is not obvious. The awareness of God is very, very hidden. I brought a good, you know, I have here a good example that I put up over here. I really like this one. It's a really short skit, but it'll show you just really, I guess, the difference between how we are in our world and how it is in more spiritual worlds, so to speak. The difference between awareness by choice, which is what we have in this world, and awareness by fact that you have in the more spiritual worlds. Okay, it's a little bit funny, it's a little bit entertaining, but it's really short, and it's just really hang on to every word, because a lot packed into just a short few couple lines over here.
And sometimes I just feel so lost, you know?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, what about you? How do you always stay so connected, so aware of a higher power?
Well, I'd say part of it is self-discipline. You know, a specific, deliberate effort on my part to remind myself that we're all really just extensions of the infinite. And I'd say a big part of it is probably this harness rig that attaches me directly to my creator.
So there you have it. One guy is us. We're on this earth, and we're trying to figure out how do we maintain an awareness of God. Obviously, it's a physical depiction. And the other guy says, maybe my discipline, but it's also, I can't escape it. It's part of my reality. The rope is, you know, just connects me to heaven. That's what, when you get to higher spiritual worlds, that's what they feel. It's to the point where you can't deny it. It's an existence that one cannot escape. And this connection to God. We don't have that here on this earth. We don't have that rope, that automatic awareness, that awareness that we cannot escape from our reality. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe says that if we had the full awareness, we actually wouldn't be us. So in other words, there's a reason why we're not aware. It's actually, there's a purpose in that. So let's read over here. The fact that every creation and event appears to us as tangible and real is only because we do not apprehend and see with our physical eyes the godly energy and divine breath within each creation. But if the eye were allowed to see and apprehend the vitality and spirituality being infused into every creation by divine utterance, the physicality, materiality, and substance of the creation would be utterly invisible to us. As such, there literally is nothing besides him. And so we don't have that awareness. But what he's saying is if we had that awareness, we would not be able to deny it. And now that we have this idea, I guess what I'm trying to present is really the descent of the world of the four worlds is more feeling of awareness, less awareness of God. And as you have a less awareness of God, you also feel more yourself. So again, the less you are aware of God, the more you can feel that you is you. And we on this earth really feel that we are we, right? We don't automatically feel subsumed within God. And now we'll get back to the worlds. Now, hopefully you have an idea. And now I'm going to explain to you in a really interesting way. Let's compare this to the 4 worlds of awareness. Let's compare this to a child, to a parent. The highest world emanation, let's call a fetus. A fetus has a full awareness of its source. It cannot deny it. It doesn't feel, it is an other. It does have a self-awareness, but very, very minimal. It is an other. It is a being. The fetus is a being, but it feels so close to its source. In fact, the other word for Atzilut means close. And so the world of emanation is a world in which, like a fetus, it feels itself as a being, as an otherness, but barely. It has the full awareness that it's so close to God. Then we get to the next level, is like a newborn. Bria, creation. Here, the newborn does feel separate, but fully dependent on the parents. Has no feeling of self, totally dependent on the parents. And so there is a big jump from these two, obviously, just as a fetus to child is a big jump. Similarly, the world of Bria, the world of creation, again, this is not where we live, I'll get to where we live in a moment, is a world where you compare it to like a newborn. It does have the feeling of otherness to the point where it's a separate creation, but totally feels the awareness. You could almost look like that guy hanging on the rope, a full awareness of that connection. Then you get to the world of formation. We can compare this to 2-year-olds maybe, where they recognize, they're starting to recognize their independence and their own talents, at the same time recognizing they need their parents and why they keep needing to be picked up. And then you have the world of Asiyah, the world of action. And this world is actually split into 2, but let's just call this adult children, which fully feel independent and feel like their parents know nothing and they know everything and they're smarter than everybody else. And so this is what we have, the 4 worlds, the 4 worlds of awareness as it pertains to God. I gave you the example here, fetus, newborn, child, adult, a toddler, adult. And so these are the 4 worlds. So as you can imagine, the higher the world, the more awareness of God, the more spiritual it is, right? Even though it's not closer to God per se, because God is in all of them, their awareness of their connection to God is greater. And so you would think that God would like, let's say, the world of Atzilut better, a nicer place. People are more aware of their angels. I would say not people, no people there. Angels are more aware of God over there, right? They have a better grasp of it, or even Bria, Yetzirah, emanation, creation, formation. What does God want with the world of creation? Why is he so obsessed with it? And so it's interesting is that so what is our world? Our world is a world where the awareness of God is completely hidden, but yet it's the truth. So again, we live in a world where the awareness of God is completely hidden. It's not natural to us, but yet it's the truth. And all of these other worlds are actually created for us down here. Okay, they may be greater than us. They may have more awareness of God. They're all created for us. And we know from the Torah that we are the purpose. It's not just Hasidic philosophy, but here is even a text in Deuteronomy. This mitzvah that I command you today is not mysterious to you, nor is it far away. It is not in heaven that you should say who will go up to heaven for us and get it for us and teach us that we can do it. Rather, the matter is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to do it. So we see here again, this is just for Deuteronomy, this idea that it's all about down here. The purpose is down here. It's not somewhere else. It's not some spiritual experience. It's not in the mountains of Tibet. I think my camera went out of focus. It's not in the mountains of Tibet. It's not about sitting and meditating. It's about the action that's down here. And so the question is, why is this world the most important? And the answer is, simply put, although the more spiritual worlds have a greater awareness of God, they are also a concealment on God. So I'm going to say that again. Although the more spiritual worlds have a greater awareness of God, you might say they're more spiritual, more holy, but they are also a concealment on God. Because it's not pure God. Things that live there have a feeling of otherness. Even if it's minimal, they have a feeling of otherness. And so there's no point. In other words, if God's goal was spirituality, if God's goal was to have a super spiritual world, then he just wouldn't create anything. There would be no reason to create anything, right? Just stay as he is. Spirituality, godliness everywhere. Why would he need to create something that's less? Why would he need to create a lesser version of spirituality? And so actually Tanya says, therefore we have to say the purpose is in this world where we have the greatest concealment of all. And we can see it's the purpose because it's the last. The upper worlds eventually lead to this world. Like I said, remember, it's like a chain. As you can see, kind of like the kids, you know, the fetus leads to the child, which leads to the newborn, which leads to the child, which leads to the adult. There's a devolution of God's awareness, and the ultimate goal is this world. So what does God want with our world? What does he desire? What does it mean? What does he want with our world? So first, let me just tell you all, because I forgot to tell you, to summarize, at least to tell you. We've now explained, I'll answer the question. Somebody asked, are there tzaddikim who are aware of God? It says that even the greatest tzaddik on this earth does not have the awareness of God that they had when they were in the Garden of Eden. So they have a greater awareness than us, but they do not have the same awareness they have when they are bodiless, for the simple reason that if they were able to experience that awareness, they would cease to exist on this earth. So the answer is, they have a greater awareness than us, but not the full awareness. So again, I've now explained to you that what are the worlds, plural. We said there are worlds, and that God's purpose is this lowly world. I've explained to you why this world is lowly. And now I'm going to explain to you, why does God desire a home in this lowly world? And the answer is, first of all, that I don't have to answer the question because God desires it. So if God desires it, I don't really have to answer the question. It's what he wants, right? So he doesn't have to give any explanations. But let's try and give a little bit of explanation. In fact, the prophets say, "Mibisari erze Eloka." From my flesh, we can perceive God. And so maybe we can get a little bit of an inkling into what God wants. So one way to understand it is like this. God is perfect. And because he is perfect, he doesn't lack anything. But because he's perfect, he also cannot be imperfect, right? If God is all-powerful, he cannot be weak. If God is all-powerful, there's no challenges. If God is all-powerful, there's no achievement because he can really do whatever he wants. If God is all-powerful, he doesn't need any partners. If he doesn't need any partners, there's no relationship. Relationships are really when somebody has something that you need. So God doesn't need any of these things because he's perfect. He doesn't need challenge. He doesn't need imperfection. He doesn't need relationships. He doesn't need any of these things. However, even though he doesn't need them, he wanted them, okay? He didn't need any of it. He doesn't need any of it, but he desired it. And he desired, as a perfect being, that there should be a place where there's imperfection, and he will put a part of himself, the godly soul, within each and every single one of us, and we will work in this world, in this imperfect world, through the challenges, through the difficulties, through the darkness, and we will be God's partners on this earth and have a relationship with him to do what he wants on this earth. So again, God doesn't need, right? We all know today, right? The challenge is what makes you stronger. God doesn't need that. And he has no challenges, and he doesn't need any challenges. Imperfections. There's a certain beauty in people who are imperfect and do things anyways. There's a beauty in that. But God doesn't have any need for that. God is perfect. But nevertheless, God desired to create us beings in a world where there is a concealment of the truth, and we will be partners with him to take the imperfection of this world, work through its challenges, and bring a revelation of God even here in this earth. So we asked earlier, if God wanted a perfect world, why not just create a perfect world? And the answer is yes, he could have, and wouldn't be difficult. But what he desired was he wanted a world which was imperfect, and that we should work through the challenges and create something cool out of it. And so there is something nice about the novelty of it. As I've given the example earlier, we like novelty, right? For example, we like birds that talk. Parrots. Parrots are cool. Why? Because people talk. Animals don't usually talk. So it's cool when a parrot talks. It's like, wow, right? Even though I could say a lot more words than the parrot, imagine if you had a sermon from the parrot. It'll say it's the same 10 things over and over and over and over, right? No fun. But, we like to listen to parrots. We like to hear novel things. If my son can sing his song half of the words, it's exciting because it's novel, right? We like novelty. And so although God has no need for novelty, but he desired it. Now I'm going to say one more thing that might go over your head. And if you're worried about me confusing you, you can ignore me for a moment. Okay. This still begs the question. If God doesn't need it, but he could desire it, then in a sense, you could say he's lacking something. You could say he's lacking challenge in his life. He's lacking working through imperfection. He's lacking partnership, relationship. And the answer to that is that all of those things are only beneficial because God desired they should be beneficial. Okay, so let me backtrack. Imagine you're in a world with only God. There is no such thing that relationships are good. There is no such thing that working through imperfection is cool. There's no such thing as making light of darkness is a great thing. Okay, God created those as cool things, and then he desired to have it. Okay, so just so you understand, God was never lacking anything. He created something that's cool, and then he desired to have it. Okay, it probably will make your head spin, but I just wanted to throw that out there, lest somebody had any thoughts that God is not perfect. So you understand God is perfect in every way. And if there's anything that he even wants, not even needs, if there's anything he even wants, he created the fact that there even could be something that he wants. Okay? I know I'm confusing you. Let me show you over here a Midrash, which brings out the idea that we've been discussing. The Midrash says over here, let's take a look, text number 10. Everything, and this would answer Steve's question earlier. Here it is from the Midrash. I told you I was going to quote it. Everything that was created in the 6 days of creation requires further doing. The mustard seeds need to be tempered. Legumes need to be softened. Grains need to be milled. Even the human being requires fixing. Rashi explains, this is the meaning of what it says. All of his work which God created to make. The Torah doesn't say that God created and made, but rather created to make. This is to teach us that everything requires fixing. And so God created an imperfect world because he wanted to see us in this world to make something out of it. Could he have made it to begin with perfect? Yes. But he desired that working through imperfection is cool, and he desired us to do it. And so he had desired us in this lowly world to work through the imperfection and to ultimately bring the Moshiach. So we asked earlier, well, if God just wants the times of Moshiach, he should just make it. Yeah, he wants the times of Moshiach, but he also wants us to work to get there. So that's why he didn't create it to begin with. He put it there. That's the plan. He didn't need it to be worked on to get there, but he desired that that's what he wants. And so that's what we're doing. And we as human beings living in the world God created, we can appreciate that desire. Again, before God desired it, he didn't have to have such a desire. Now that God desired it, we can appreciate what it is that he wanted. Turning darkness to light, taking things and making them better, adding perfection to an imperfect world. We can appreciate all of those ideas. But all of those ideas only exist, and those are only good things because that's what God desired. Is your head spinning? A little, okay, a little bit, hopefully. But the ultimate goal is that we work through all of this. We take this world that was imperfect, and we bring the God into it. And when we do that, we ultimately come to the ultimate, which is, as it says, as the prophet said, no longer shall your master be cloaked, and your eyes will see your master. And so the idea is that that's where we're heading to. That's where we're getting to. And so if we look in the books of the prophets, why do we need to be in, what is the connection between a perfect world and the Moshiach? What is the connection between the perfect world and, God being revealed and being in the temple and the holy temple and everything? So everything is a body and a soul. And so the world being perfect and peaceful is an expression of the fact that the soul of the world has been repaired. And I guess what I'm getting to is like this. This is an interesting thought. A lot of people think, right, the prophets talk about peace. The prophets talk about world peace, everybody getting along. And so what's the best way to bring about world peace? Is to get along with others, is to get rid of sickness, get rid of illness, like the Torah talks about. But if you just do that, you're actually missing a key component, because the perfection of the peace of the world is actually an outgrowth of the spiritual perfection of the world. Again, the physical perfection of the world is an outgrowth of the spiritual perfection of the world. And so there cannot be true full peace in this world. There cannot be true full healing in this world, in the physical, until we complete it in the spiritual, until we take a world that the awareness of God is not complete and make the world aware of God. And that's what we started off with. This is a lowly world where there's a lack of awareness of God. When we bring the awareness of God within the world, when we complete that, then the other items will fall in place. And that is why we've discussed in the previous classes how the world is getting better and better. Why is the world getting better and better physically? And we've showed how it's getting exponentially better. Because as we get closer to the Moshiach, there's a physical expression of the world getting better, of the awareness of God coming to the world more and more and more. And so as we increase awareness of God into the world, into our lives, the concealment of the world slowly dissipates. And that's why lives are getting longer, and there's more world peace, and there's less death, and medicine is progressing. All of that is actually an outgrowth of the spirituality. So if we were to take Judaism and cut out all the spiritual actions and just focus on making world peace, it would never happen. It would never happen. It's not to take away from those efforts in world peace, but we cannot take one without the other. Now you're going to ask me, so how do I bring awareness of God into the world? And are we really doing that? The answer to that question, just one second. The answer to that question will be next week. So it's a two-part series. The answer to that question will be next week. The short answer is we're going to do Torah and mitzvot. The long answer to that will be next week. When we do Torah and mitzvot, we bring the awareness of God into this world. And you may ask, well, I don't see awareness of God in this world. That's for next week. So before I'm going to take the question, I really want to just say this. I really want to finish off. So what have we established today? We have established that we live in the world that God desired. This is what God desired. God wanted a lowly world. What is a lowly world? We've defined what is lowly: a world that lacks awareness of God. So why would God want to create a world that lacks awareness of God? Because God wanted to take people who live in a world that lacks awareness of God and bring awareness of God into it. To take imperfect, make it perfect. Take darkness, add in their light. And when we do the spiritual work of elevating the world, bringing the awareness of God into the world, then slowly, slowly the world is also elevated physically. All of those physical promises are the outgrowths of the spiritual of the spiritual healing that is going on in the world. And that's why it's so important to focus not just on what people call today tikkun olam, which people think tikkun olam means recycling, but tikkun olam is much more than that. If you look in the origination of the world, tikkun olam, it comes from the Aleinu prayer, where it says L'sakin olam b'malchus shin dal yud, to establish the world in the kingship of God. That's where it comes from. That's what real tikkun olam is, making the world aware of God. And so we have to do both of those items. We have to add world peace, get along with our neighbors, and at the same time, we have to do the Torah mitzvot, which we're going to explain next week. How is it that we bring awareness of God? And so the mission for the week, because again, I'm kind of leaving you hanging over here, but the mission for the week is to recognize we live in, so to speak, a lowly world, a world where there's a lack of awareness of God. But it's by divine design, and it's in this world where God wants us to take the lack of awareness and bring awareness. And think in our lives, how can I add this greater awareness of God? Not just to focus on the physical things in my life, but the spirituality of my life. Because when I focus on the spiritual parts of my life, the physical parts will get better along too, as we've seen in this class. And so try and find those darker places in your life, bring the awareness of God in there, and make the world a brighter and better place. And I'll say one line that the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, once said. He said, God made something out of nothing, and our job is to make nothing out of something. What does that mean? To make nothing out of something, to take things that are egotistical, to take things that say me, and say everything is godly. Thank you for coming tonight. And I'm going to take Steve Rayo's question now, because he's been waiting patiently.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Hi.
Mike,
I'm going to be the simple son from Pesach, okay?
Okay.
What does this mean as far as what is the concept of this class? I missed the first class.
You didn't have to come to the first class for this one. But the concept of this class, we were explaining what is Moshiach from the spiritual perspective of Moshiach. Is Moshiach just about making the world a peaceful place? No, we've been showing how the Moshiach is a lot more than that. Moshiach is making is fulfilling God's divine purpose and desire. What is God's divine purpose and desire? To take a world which is not aware of God and make it aware of God. That's what Moshiach is about. So God created this world. He created it in a way where there's a lack of awareness of God, and we're supposed to bring the awareness of God into it. And that's the goal, and it's the whole reason why everything's created. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Any other questions? Yes, Steve. I know you wanted to ask. You have to unmute though. Otherwise, we will not have an awareness of what you're saying. You can talk, but we won't be aware of it. It'll be there, but we won't hear it.
All right.
Yeah, you have to unmute. Okay. Anybody else has a question while we're waiting for the unmuting? Anybody else? Oh, there. Tech.
Thank you very much for this great class, Rabbi.
Thank you. But
you,
if anybody
Rabbi.
wants to go, you're free to go. I finished. Unless if you're still confused, you can call me. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear us?
Yeah. Now I can hear you. Yeah. Go for it.
Oh, okay, I'm on. It occurs to me then that what we are doing is good because God says it's good to do it. But is it not true then that if everybody did it, and of course you can't get two Jews to agree to do anything first off anyway, but talk about the rest of the people of the world, if everybody just stopped doing anything to make the world better, wouldn't Moshiach come anyway?
You're saying if we all stop trying to bring Moshiach, Moshiach will come anyway?
Yeah.
Well, that gets into, it says elsewhere that Moshiach can either come if we're all good or we're all bad. But I'll take the first option. I don't like the second option. It doesn't sound like sounds very good.
Well, that's for us lazy people, you know.
That means, in a sense, it means we failed. We didn't do the job, and we got lost, and God had to do it for us because He's not going to leave us hanging forever.
Loses some of the fun, huh?
Huh?
We would lose some of the fun of participating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.